Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Borrowed Time by Lane Cohen, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, North Avondale, Cincinnati, Ohio, present day. The photos were crooked, again. It was like an impish ghost played a private joke on him every time he walked into his old three-story wood and stone Victorian house. He shook his head at the wall, and before he even sat down his car keys and sunglasses, he began to straighten the dark plastic picture frames back to their proper positions. He took a moment with each picture, many of them black and white, the scenes illustrating periods of his life. They summoned memories with every smile of friends and family members who gazed back at him. The images ranged broadly in age from his grandparents starting in the late 1940s and other friends and family members through the 1950s and 60s, up to 5 years ago. One photo of he and Pamela remained. He didn't have the strength to take down all of them. The picture captured them in the brilliant sun of a South Carolina beach, their arms around each other, smiling at the camera. He remembered the stranger on the beach who agreed to take the picture. She was about 13 and probably knew how to use the phone camera better than he did. And his favorite picture of Francie gazed from the wall as well, out into space with her elusive grin and her blue eyes squinting at him quizzically as if attempting to figure out exactly what he meant by his last comment. Francie was surrounded by a warm summer day. She was barefoot, dressed in her typical khaki shorts, untucked white blouse, and she was leaning back with her head resting against the big tree that dominated the backyard of the rambling 4-bedroom ranch home in Delhi she lived in for most of her married life. She never told him who took his favorite picture. He chuckled softly to himself. Francie almost always had a look like that on her face, even the day they talked to each other for the first time, about 5 years ago. The gym in the UC Rec Center was crowded around noon, and he tried to get there for a quick workout either early in the day or maybe around 3 o'clock when the classes he taught were over and the lunch rush had passed. At 3:15, as he expected, only a few dedicated fitness gurus inhabited the place. It was cardio day for him, which he didn't feel like doing. He didn't feel like working out with weights either, but his routine was his routine, and he had to keep up with it or he might crumble into dust. He changed quickly out of his shirt and khakis in the humid locker room, took a few steps, and had no trouble spotting an empty treadmill at the end of the line in the central cardio area. He trudged that way and dreaded the oncoming boredom. He was dressed in shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt he had worked out in only twice before without washing it. He held a book in one hand, a paperback he'd carried with him for 5 or 6 weeks and barely read 50 pages. An off-white towel was draped behind his neck. He had only the hint of sweat on his forehead when he looked up from the book he had propped on the treadmill and blinked at the woman who stood right beside him. She was about his age, late 30s, maybe 5'10", about an inch taller than he was. It was hard to tell for sure since he was up on the treadmill. She stared at him with the bluest eyes in the world. Her dirty blonde hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail. She rested one elbow on the front of the treadmill and nodded at him. Hi, Case said. She pointed one thumb at the name tag pinned on her rec center polo shirt just below her left collarbone. Francie. So, she said. Case slowed to a stop on the treadmill and pushed the off icon on the control panel. So? I've noticed you in here before. Yeah? I'm Francie. He glanced at her name tag. I can see that. It's really France. I'm France Lord. France Ray Lord. France. Your first name is France? She nodded. Okay. Most call me Francie or Francie Ray. She gave him a quick smile. He struggled to break away from her blue-eyed gaze. Her eyes swirled green toward their center. Can I guess? Guess? How your parents came up with your name? She shrugged. It's about what you would expect. He stepped down from the treadmill and stood a few feet from her. He had been right. She was about 5'10". They, conceived you while on a vacation in France, most likely in Paris. She rested her hands on her hips. Yep, not that hard. Uh-huh. He struggled with what he should say next. Random women never approached him out of nowhere. Can I ask you something? That is something. He thought about it. Something else? Sure. He spotted the glint from a gold wedding band. It's your shirt. My shirt? On the back, I've seen it before this past week on all the trainers. Oh, yeah. You know it's misspelled. I do. We all do. Really? When the shirts came in a few weeks ago, we spotted the error right away, but, she chuckled. We thought it was funny. Well, I did. Personnel trainer instead of personal. It's like we train people on HR techniques. Looks like the t-shirt company could use some extra personal training with their spelling techniques. She took a breath. Looks like. Yeah. She gestured at the book behind him on the treadmill shelf. Bill Bryson. I like him. The story is a comedy travelogue. How far are you? Not far. Not that far. She grinned. I read one by him last summer on a family vacation to the beach. It was about Australia. That was a perfect beach book. He considered, from the ring on her finger and her vacation comment, he had instantly learned she had a family. She said, he has a good sense of humor, Bill Bryson. I like a good sense of humor. Takes your mind away from the usual crap in life. Somebody in my department at UC recommended him. A Walk in the Woods is my first of his. I'm barely 4 chapters into it. What about you? What about your sense of humor? I kind of like Sanford and Son and MASH. Used to watch those two with my dad. He watched them when he wasn't watching classic westerns. He loved those old comedies. You could hear his laughter all over the house, but haven't seen much of them in a while. Old school. Yeah, I haven't gotten much into the more recent stuff except a Seinfeld now and then. Her eyes jittered from side to side and seemed to have trouble settling. So I'm going to be in Starbucks at 5:15. Starbucks. It's a coffee shop? He gazed at her. Oh, what Starbucks? On Vine in Quarryville. And what? What do you think? I don't. You don't? You want me to meet you there? She smirked at him. A good sense of humor, but not that smart. Can't have everything, I guess. He held up his left hand and steadied it in midair, a simple gold band encircled in his ring finger. I see it, Francie said. I saw it before. And she turned, stepped away, and looked over her shoulder at him as she walked toward the locker room doors. 5:15. He silently watched the woman glide away from him, with the words personnel trainer printed across the back of her teal polo shirt. His heart thumped in his chest harder than if he had been running on the treadmill for 30 minutes. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of one hand. She wanted to meet him there. And then what? Case suspected there would be more to it than just an hour of coffee and a discussion of the latest films and TV shows. He had married his first love about 10 years earlier, and in those 10 years of happy marriage, which had been empty of any emotional bumps along their road together, he had not so much as flirted with another woman. Such a concept never occurred to him. Maybe that was because he felt like he had no need of anything extramarital. On the other hand, maybe it was because such an opportunity never so easily presented itself. For whatever reason, he had steered clear of any such errant behavior during his 10 years of marriage. The real reason for such avoidance didn't matter now, since he had no legitimate reason to wander over to Quarryville late this afternoon to share a few moments with a tall, extremely fit woman with the bluest eyes in the world. He had no legitimate reason whatsoever. And Case felt the tears start behind his eyes. Like always. Like almost every morning, every afternoon. His day was going well until he passed by his wall of photos and 4 years of Francie had come rushing back. Being with her was magical, different than with anyone else. Countless times together overflowing with passion until a year ago. He tore his eyes from Francie's gaze, glanced at a half-empty bottle of Maker's Mark bourbon nearby on a side table, and tried to blink both images away. It was far too soon for even one taste of that mellow whiskey. Lately, his relationship with Makers had been starting earlier and earlier in the day. A photo of his grandpa, Victor Case, caught his attention. The image never failed to bring a smile to his face. In the picture, his grandpa, who he called Zadie Victor, was in his heyday on the Warner studio lot with both the actors Rod Taylor and Yvette Mimieux standing on either side of his grandpa, all smiling at the camera. Case grinned. He had been totally in love with Yvette Mimouze since he was 9 years old and first saw the time machine. According to his grandpa and later his dad, the photo of Yvette and the others in the picture on his wall was taken by the director, George Powell. Case took a breath and glanced down at his watch. 4:15. He had plenty of time to splash some cold water on his face, lots of cold water, and grab something quick for dinner. Maybe he could reheat the leftover mac and cheese from noodles, then sequester himself in his study and prepare his lesson plan for his advanced class tomorrow before he poured his first glass of whiskey and relaxed for the evening. That would be fine. 4:15 would be fine. And at least the book work would give him some distraction, even though the lesson plan wouldn't take much effort. It was essentially the same material he had taught for the last 6 years as head of the university physics department. Maybe he should return to the spirited discussion about Einstein's theories he had with the class last month. At least the students seemed somewhat interested in that material. Francie's enigmatic smile still pressed at the front of his brain. Sometimes there was just nothing he could do about it. Most all the time, really. Francie haunted him, painfully pressing at the very center of his chest, stopping his breath again and again, even after all this time. 4:15 would be fine. Lesson plans be damned. He grabbed the red wax-covered neck of the whiskey bottle from a countertop, pushed open his study door, and switched on the light.